There is something draining your energy right now, and you don't even notice it. It's not your job. It's not the people around you. It's not your age, and it's not a lack of willpower. It's something quieter, constant, and invisible. It's happening while you read these words. If you don't identify what it is, you will keep waking up tired even after sleeping, starting projects with enthusiasm and abandoning them halfway. The feeling that something is wrong without being able to explain exactly what it is. What is draining you is not external. It is absence. For thousands of years, spiritual masters have spoken about this with different names. Some called it absolute presence. Others called it effortless action. Others, alignment with the flow of life. Today we use the word flow, but almost no one truly understands what that means. Flow is not constant euphoria or extreme productivity. Flow is simply being here. Completely, and that is rare. Most people live physically in one place and mentally in another. The body is present, but the mind is not. The body takes a shower while the mind revisits old arguments. The body works while the mind rehearses future scenarios. The body talks while the mind replies to imaginary messages. This seems normal because everyone does it, but the energetic cost is enormous. Every time your mind leaves the present moment, your energy goes with it. As it goes to the past trying to rewrite what has already ended, or it goes to the future trying to control what has not even been born yet. Meanwhile, the only point where life actually happens is left empty. Here, there is a reason why after talking about the past, you feel drained. There is a reason why thinking excessively about the future creates physical anxiety. There is a reason why you feel exhausted even when you haven't made great physical efforts. Your energy is not where your body is, and energy follows attention. If your attention is scattered, your strength is scattered as well. At any moment, you are in one of three states. The first is living in the past, repeating conversations mentally, revisiting decisions, imagining better answers to situations that are already over. It looks like reflection, but often it is an attempt to resurrect something that has already crystallized. The past is a frozen picture. When you try to reanimate it, you use real energy to feed something that can no longer change. Each repetition weakens the present. The second state is living in the future. Projections, worries, fantasies, multiple possible scenarios. The future is a field of probabilities. Nothing there is fixed. When you dive into those possibilities, your energy splits in multiple directions. You feed one hypothesis, then another, and in the present moment, very little remains. The body is here, but you are not. The third state is presence, body and consciousness in the same point. No escape to the past, no compulsive anticipation of what has not yet happened. Only what is in front of you now. When that happens, something changes internally. The energy that was leaking begins to concentrate. The mind stops fighting what has already passed and stops fearing what has not yet come. Clarity appears, but there is something even deeper draining your energy beyond distraction. Resistance. Resistance to what is happening. Resistance to circumstances. Resistance to people. Resistance to yourself. Every time you think, this shouldn't be like this, you create internal friction. That friction consumes vital energy. Acceptance does not mean agreeing with everything or becoming passive. It means recognizing what is, without wasting energy fighting the fact that it already is. From that recognition, action becomes efficient. Before that, it is only exhaustion. There is also internal hurry. That constant feeling that something must happen immediately. Hurry communicates to your own system that you are in scarcity. And scarcity generates tension. Tension interrupts flow. You begin pulling the future with anxiety, and the more you pull, the farther away it seems. Flow requires trust. Doing what needs to be done now, with quality, and allowing the result to mature at the right time. Just like a seed does not grow faster because you dig it up repeatedly to check if it has already sprouted. Another modern factor draining your energy is constant stimulation. Small, instant rewards that train your brain to seek quick pleasure. Endless scrolling, notifications, short videos, successive distractions. Each small stimulus creates a chemical response. Your brain learns that it is easier to chase these impulses than to remain present in the silence of now. Little by little, the ability for deep focus weakens. Staying in the present starts to feel boring, but it is precisely in that silence that your energy reorganizes itself. There is also the lack of grounding. Many people seek inspiration but not stability. They feel peaks of motivation, have brilliant ideas, imagine grand futures, but cannot transform them into concrete action because they are disconnected from their own body. True flow requires alignment between mind and physical reality. It requires feeling your feet on the ground, your breath moving in and out, tension being released. When you are grounded, your energy does not disperse, as it flows through you and transforms into action. How do you know if you are in flow? You feel energy available, not agitation, but stable vitality. Your attention remains on the task without excessive effort. Time feels different, more integrated. Synchronicities appear not as magic, but because you are attentive enough to notice opportunities when they arise. Your action becomes direct. Less mental noise, more presence. Now return to the initial question. What is draining your energy right now? It is not the world. It is not circumstances. It is the fragmentation of your attention and the constant resistance to what is. Every repeated inner dialogue, every anticipated worry, every automatic distraction consumes real biological resources. Your brain reacts to thoughts as if they were real experiences. Your body tenses, your nervous system activates, and you pay the price in the form of exhaustion. Take a deep breath now. Notice where your attention is. If it is not completely here, you have just witnessed the mechanism in action. The good news is that this can change. Presence is training. Every time you notice that you got lost in thought and return to the present moment, you strengthen this ability. Not with guilt, but with awareness. Small, repeated returns build stability. Start simple. Feel your breath for a few moments. Notice your feet touching the ground. Listen to the sounds around you without interpreting them. Do one task at a time. Turn necessary thoughts into immediate actions whenever possible. Reduce quick stimuli for a few days and observe how your mind reacts. Little by little, silence stops being uncomfortable and becomes a source of energy. You are not without strength. You are dispersed. Your energy did not disappear. It was distributed between past, future, resistance, and distraction. The present moment is the only point where it can be recovered. This is where decisions become real. This is where life responds. When you are here completely, something reorganizes itself. Energy concentrates, clarity appears, action aligns. And then the question that opened all of this stops being merely rhetorical. There is something draining your energy right now. Now you know what it is. The only question that remains is simple and direct. Will you continue allowing your attention to live somewhere else? Or will you bring it back to the only point where your life actually happens? In the first part, you realize that there is something draining your energy right now, and that it isn't external. It isn't the world, it isn't circumstances, and it isn't other people. It is the fragmentation of your attention. But now we need to go deeper, because dispersion is only the symptom. The root is quieter. And until you see this root clearly, you will keep trying to improve your life without actually recovering your strength. The root is resistance. Resistance to what is. Almost no one realizes how much of the day is spent mentally resisting reality. You wake up and it already begins. You wanted to sleep longer. It's too hot. It's too cold. The message took too long. The reply wasn't what you expected. The traffic is slow. The meeting is unnecessary. That person should behave differently. You yourself should be at another point in life. Small thoughts of rejection accumulate throughout the entire day. This shouldn't be like this. It seems harmless, but every time you think this, you create an internal division between reality and your expectation. and maintaining that division consumes energy. It is like holding a compressed spring all the time. At first you don't notice it, but the effort is constant. Resisting what is already happening is exactly that. Reality is already in front of you. When you mentally say no, you have to sustain that opposition. Sustaining it requires continuous energy. It doesn't matter whether the problem is small or large, the mechanism is the same. Accepting does not mean liking everything or agreeing with injustices. It means stopping the waste of energy spent denying the fact that something already is. From acceptance, you can act with clarity. Before that, you act contaminated by tension, and constant tension shuts down flow. When your nervous system lives activated by micro-resistances and micro-anxieties, it enters survival mode. In this mode, there are only 3 responses: fight, flight, or freeze. None of them is flow. Flow requires relaxed presence, alert but not tense, firm but not rigid. Notice how you react when something does not go according to plan. Irritation, worry, or frustration appears. This reaction is not only emotional, it is physiological. Your body contracts, your breathing shortens, your focus narrows. You lose breadth of perception, and the narrower your perception becomes, thus the less energy is available to create solutions. There is also constant comparison. Comparing your progress with other people's progress. Comparing your current phase with an idealized version of the past. Comparing your present with an imagined future. Comparison is also resistance. It is declaring that what is here is not enough. And every time you reinforce that narrative, you reinforce an internal state of scarcity. Scarcity generates hurry. Hurry generates tension. Tension blocks presence. And without presence, there is no flow. You begin to understand the cycle. Dispersion leads to lack of energy. Resistance keeps dispersion active. Tension keeps resistance alive. So you try to compensate with more stimulation, more forced productivity, more consumption, more distraction. But this only deepens the leak. Another powerful mechanism that sustains this drain is immediate reward. Your brain releases chemicals when you accomplish something meaningful. But today, it receives small rewards all the time without real effort. A notification, a new message, a short video, a constant update. Small and frequent doses of stimulation train your system to avoid any activity that requires prolonged presence. Flow, however, only happens when there is deep and continuous involvement, when you fully immerse yourself in an action. But a brain conditioned to rapid stimulation begins to find the silence of the present boring. So it searches for another distraction. Each distraction breaks the continuity of your energy. Over time, you lose the capacity to sustain attention for long periods. Without sustained attention, there is no consistent creation, no depth, no meaningful achievement. You start many things and finish few. This generates frustration. Frustration reinforces the narrative of incapacity, and that narrative consumes even more energy. There is also a more subtle point: identity. A large part of your energy is trapped in maintaining an image of who you believe you need to be. You react to situations from a constructed identity. I am like this. I always do this. I never manage to achieve that yet. Each of these statements is a mental structure that must be maintained. Maintaining a rigid identity requires energy. When you are truly present, identity becomes flexible. You respond to the moment instead of defending a fixed version of yourself. This releases strength. But as long as you remain trapped in the need to prove something, justify something, or maintain a constant narrative about who you are, part of your energy will remain committed. Notice how everything converges to the same point: dispersion, resistance, tension, comparison, immediate reward, rigid identity. All of these mechanisms move you away from the present moment. And the present moment is the only place where your energy can be recovered. Energy does not increase only with physical rest. Energy increases when you stop wasting it. If your attention keeps leaking throughout the entire day, no amount of sleep will be enough. What changes the game is not doing more, but dispersing less. Observe during a single day how many times you mentally disagree with what is happening, how many times you revisit past situations, how many times you anticipate problems that have not even arrived yet. Just observe, without judgment. You will notice that the drain is almost continuous. Now imagine that instead of feeding each thought, you simply noticed it and returned to the present moment, not to force positivity, but to interrupt the leak. This repeated return begins to rebuild your internal strength. Presence is not something mystical reserved for a few. It is a daily practice of returning to the body, returning to the breath, returning to the task in front of you. Every time you return, the energy that was scattered begins to concentrate. When energy concentrates, clarity appears. When clarity appears, decisions become simple. When decisions become simple, action flows. And when action flows, results appear with less effort. But there is still something fundamental that determines whether this will be sustainable or just a temporary moment. That element is grounding, a real connection with the body and with concrete reality. Without this, any accumulated energy quickly disperses again. And that is exactly where we need to go deeper, so that you not only understand what is draining your energy, but also learn how to keep your strength fully present in the only place where life truly happens. There is a decisive point that separates those who understand the idea of presence from those who truly transform their lives. Grounding. You can intellectually understand everything that has been said so far. You can agree that dispersion drains energy, that resistance creates tension, that comparison generates scarcity. But if this understanding does not move from thought into the body, nothing changes in a lasting way. Because the leak does not happen only in the mind, it happens in the entire system. Most people live from the head upward. Constant thoughts, endless analysis, projections, memories, internal narratives. The body becomes almost an accessory that carries the mind from one place to another. But the body is the anchoring point of consciousness. When you are not truly inside it, your energy has nowhere to stabilize. It rises as anxiety, spreads as restlessness, and dissipates as mental exhaustion. Observe something simple. When you are anxious, where does your attention go? Usually above the neck, pressure in the forehead, a tight jaw, short breathing in the chest. The body is there, but you are not fully inhabiting it. You are hovering in thoughts, and thought without grounding turns into noise. If what I'm saying makes sense to you, and you feel ready to deepen this experience, I've left a more complete material in the pinned comment. You don't need to look at it now. Just remember it when the time feels right. Grounding means bringing awareness back to direct experience. Feeling your feet touching the ground. Noticing the weight of your body on the chair. Hearing the sounds around you without immediately labeling them. Breathing more deeply and noticing the air moving in and out. This seems too basic to be powerful, but that is exactly where the strength lies. Because when you anchor in the body, your energy stops wandering. There is a huge difference between thinking about life and experiencing life. Thinking about it is always one step removed from reality. It is a representation. Experiencing is direct contact. Flow only happens in direct contact. It does not happen in endless analysis. Many people confuse emotional intensity with vitality. They believe that being accelerated means being energized. But constant acceleration is simply an overloaded nervous system. True vitality is stable. It is quiet. It is deep. You feel strength available without agitation. This only appears when mind and body are aligned in the same place. Without grounding, any attempt at focus becomes forced effort. You try to concentrate, but the mind escapes. You try to meditate, but thoughts dominate. You try to produce, but quickly feel mental exhaustion. Not because you are incapable, but because your energy is not integrated. Integration means that thought, emotion, and action move in the same direction. When you think one thing, feel another, and do something different. You create internal conflict, and internal conflict consumes energy all the time. When there is alignment, Force flows without friction. Notice also how the body accumulates unresolved tensions. Rigid shoulders, a locked jaw, shallow breathing. These constant micro-contractions are reflections of repetitive thoughts and unprocessed emotions. And keeping the body contracted is like keeping a muscle slightly tense all day long. It seems small, but by the end, you are exhausted. Consciously relaxing the body throughout the day already begins to interrupt this cycle. Releasing the shoulders, loosening the jaw, taking a few deep breaths, feeling your own weight. These small actions signal to the nervous system that there is no immediate threat. When the system leaves survival mode, the energy that was being used for defense becomes available for creation. There is another critical point. Presence is not passivity. Many people fear accepting the moment because they confuse acceptance with resignation. But accepting is the opposite of giving up. It is stopping the fight against the fact and using your energy to act on what can be transformed. Resistance spends energy before you even act. Acceptance preserves energy for effective action. When you are grounded and present, your decisions become simpler. Not because problems disappear, but because your perception becomes clearer. You see what needs to be done without the noise of exaggerated narratives. The mind stops creating dramatic stories and begins to deal with concrete facts. And something interesting happens here. When you are truly present in the body, time changes its quality. It stops feeling like a sequence of urgencies and becomes a sequence of complete moments. Each action receives full attention. This increases efficiency. Quality rises. And paradoxically, you accomplish more with less exhaustion. The lack of grounding also explains why many people live through peaks of motivation followed by abrupt drops. They become inspired, plan, visualize, and get excited. But because that energy exists only in the mental sphere, it cannot sustain itself. Without connection to concrete action and bodily presence, inspiration evaporates. What remains is frustration. When you are rooted, you do not depend on emotional peaks to act. You act because you are here, because the task is in front of you, because your energy is available, and this consistency builds real results. Now return to the initial question that opened everything. There is something draining your energy right now. By this point, you have already seen that it is not only distraction or resistance, it is also disconnection from your own body. It is living predominantly in mental abstraction. It is trying to control life through constant thinking. But life is not controlled only by thinking. Life is lived by being present. Try something simple now while you read these words. Feel your feet. Feel your hands. Feel your breath. Do not analyze, just feel. Notice how, when your attention returns to direct experience, there is a subtle sense of stability. That stability is the beginning of grounding. And it is the foundation of flow. Without a foundation, any structure collapses. With a solid foundation, even intense movement can be sustained. You do not need to abandon ambition. You do not need to abandon goals. You do not need to abandon growth. But you do need to abandon the attempt to live outside the present moment, while expecting the present moment to deliver energy. Flow is not something you chase. It is something that emerges when you stop moving away from the now, and as you integrate mind and body, something else begins to happen. The energy that once seemed insufficient begins to reveal itself as abundant, not because you created more of it, but because you stopped wasting it. But there is still a deeper level that needs to be faced, because even with grounding, there is still an invisible factor that determines whether you will remain present or return to the old pattern. That factor is fear. And as long as it operates behind the scenes, part of your energy will continue to be diverted. That is what we are going to reveal next. There is an even deeper point that sustains all the mechanisms draining your energy. And it is quieter than distraction, more persistent than resistance, and more rooted than the simple lack of presence. That point is fear. Not necessarily the obvious fear of something specific, but a structural fear, almost invisible, that shapes the way you think, react, and position yourself in life. It is the fear of losing, the fear of not being enough, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of being rejected, the fear of not controlling what happens. Even when you do not consciously notice it, this fear functions as a constant background, activating microtensions, accelerating thoughts, and keeping your system on alert. When fear is active, even in subtle form, your body enters protection mode. Breathing becomes shorter, muscles maintain a slight contraction, and the mind begins to anticipate risks. And anticipating risks means projecting future scenarios. Notice how everything returns to dispersion. Fear pushes you into the future, trying to predict threats. It also pulls you into the past, trying to avoid repeating mistakes. And so, once again, you leave the present moment. Fear is a force that fragments attention. But here is something essential. Fear itself is not the problem. It is a natural survival mechanism. The problem is when it becomes constant and disproportionate to the reality of the moment. Most situations in your day do not represent a real threat to your physical survival. Yet your system reacts as if they do. A difficult email becomes a threat. A different opinion becomes a threat. A small mistake becomes a threat. Your organism does not perfectly distinguish between physical danger and a symbolic threat to your identity. And identity is another key point. Much of fear is tied to protecting the image you have built about yourself. You fear failure because it threatens the narrative of competence. You fear rejection because it threatens the narrative of value. You fear losing control because it threatens the narrative of security. And maintaining these narratives requires constant energy. The more rigid the identity, the greater the fear of anything that challenges it. And the greater the fear, the more you try to control reality. And the more you try to control, the more tension you create. Excessive control is one of the greatest drains of energy. Trying to control what other people think, trying to control all outcomes, trying to control time, trying to control every variable. Control is born from the fear of uncertainty. But life is inherently uncertain. So you enter an impossible battle. And impossible battles consume infinite energy without producing real stability. There is a profound difference between responsibility and control. Responsibility is acting on what is within your reach. Control is trying to govern what is beyond your reach. When you confuse the two, you take on the weight of the entire world. And no human system can sustain that without exhaustion. Observe how you react when something escapes your planning. Does irritation appear? Anxiety? An impulse to fix it immediately? That reaction is fear trying to restore a sense of safety. But absolute safety does not exist. What exists is the capacity to adapt. And adaptation requires presence, not rigidity. Fear also appears in procrastination. Many times, you postpone tasks not out of laziness, but because of the discomfort they might generate. Fear of failing, fear of not doing it perfectly, fear of judgment. So you distract yourself. Distraction temporarily anesthetizes the fear, but it does not resolve it. And while the task remains pending, part of your energy stays trapped there, like a process running in the background. The more unfinished tasks accumulate, the more fragmented your strength becomes. There is also the fear of silence. When you stop, when there is no external stimulus, when there is no distraction, thoughts and emotions that were previously suppressed begin to surface. Many people avoid the present not because they do not understand its importance, but because in the present they encounter sensations they do not want to feel. So they run to the past or the future. Constant movement becomes escape. But permanent escape is exhausting. Facing fear does not mean eliminating it completely. It means recognizing it without allowing it to govern your attention. When you notice that you are anticipating a negative scenario, you can ask yourself, is this happening right now? Most of the time, the answer is no. The danger is hypothetical. The body, however, is reacting as if it were real. By bringing awareness back to the moment, you inform the nervous system that you are safe now. This reduces unnecessary activation. The more you practice presence, even in the presence of fear, the more your system learns that discomfort can exist without collapse. This strengthens your ability to remain in the present even when situations are challenging. And that ability is liberating, because you stop living in constant anticipation of problems. Something powerful happens when you accept uncertainty as part of the human experience. Fear loses intensity, said because it depends on the expectation that everything should be controllable. When you understand that it is not, and that you can still act with integrity, the tension decreases. Your energy stops being invested in control and begins to be invested in creation. Creating requires courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And acting in the present is the only way to move through fear. Thinking about it only prolongs its influence. Now return to the structure we have been building since the beginning. Distraction fragments your attention. Resistance generates tension. Lack of grounding prevents integration. Fear feeds constant control and projection. All of these elements work together to keep you away from the present moment. And while you remain away from it, your energy will continue leaking. But there is a turning point. It happens when you realize that fear does not need to be eliminated for you to be present. It can exist as a sensation while your awareness remains here. This subtle shift completely transforms your relationship with reality. You stop running from discomfort and begin moving through it. When you move through it, you discover something surprising. Much of the fear was amplified by the very act of escaping it. When you face it, it diminishes. And when it diminishes, your energy is released. The mental space that was once occupied by anticipation becomes available. In that space, creativity appears, intuition appears, clarity of action appears. You begin to notice that most catastrophic scenarios never actually happen, and the real challenges, when they arrive, are faced one step at a time, in the present. This changes the quality of your experience. You no longer live in a constant state of threat. You live in a state of conscious response. And here we move closer to the core of the initial question. There is something draining your energy right now. That something is not only distraction, not only resistance, and not only disconnection from the body. It is the unobserved fear that keeps you projected outside the present moment. It is the constant attempt to avoid discomfort and control the uncertain. When you see this, something begins to reorganize internally, because seeing it is already the first step to interrupting the pattern. And interrupting the pattern is the beginning of recovering your strength. But the cycle is not completely closed yet, because understanding the mechanism is not the same as transforming it into a new way of living. What remains is integrating all of this into a broader vision of your relationship with existence itself. And that is what we will consolidate in the final part, where the question that opened all of this will finally be answered in a definitive and impossible to ignore way. Now that this question has returned to the surface, it is worth staying with it for a few more moments. Because what happens after this recognition is what truly changes the way you live. When someone realizes that their energy is not being stolen by the world, but dispersed by their own pattern of attention, something deep begins to reorganize within. For a long time, you may have believed that you needed more motivation, more discipline, more strategies, more techniques. But often, what was really missing was not extra strength, but conscious direction of the energy that already existed. Notice how, throughout life, almost no one teaches this. People are taught to compete, to produce, to chase results, to plan the future, and to correct mistakes from the past. Yet rarely is anyone taught how to remain fully present while life is happening. And without this basic ability, everything else becomes heavier than it should be. The mind starts working without rest, creating scenarios, anticipating problems, trying to predict every detail. It is as if the internal system is always in alert mode, always trying to ensure that nothing goes out of control. But this constant state of vigilance comes at a cost. It consumes energy silently, minute after minute. The body becomes tense, the breathing turns shallow, the attention becomes fragmented. And when energy fragments, everything begins to feel more difficult. Small tasks require great effort. Simple decisions seem complex. The mind feels tired even when the body has not made a great physical effort. But when you begin to consciously notice these mechanisms, a completely different possibility appears. You realize that you can pause. You can breathe more deeply. You can bring your attention back to the moment that is happening right now. You can feel your own body, hear the sounds around you, notice the rhythm of your breathing. It may seem too simple to have an impact, but it is precisely in this simple gesture that energy begins to reorganize itself. Because every time attention returns to the present, it stops feeding imaginary scenarios and begins feeding concrete reality again. The mind slows down, the body relaxes, and what once felt like constant pressure starts to lose its strength. Gradually, you realize that many of the tensions you were carrying did not come from real situations in the present moment, but from thoughts trying to anticipate or reinterpret life. And when these thoughts stop dominating your attention completely, a new quality of experience begins to emerge. Things start to be perceived with greater clarity. Conversations become more real. Simple activities begin to carry a sense of presence that once seemed lost. Time no longer feels like a continuous race, and instead becomes a sequence of moments that can actually be lived. This does not mean that challenges disappear. Life continues to bring unexpected situations, difficult decisions, responsibilities, and change. But there is a profound difference between facing these challenges with a fragmented mind and facing them with present awareness. In the first case, you react automatically. In the second, you respond with consciousness, and that difference changes everything. Because when the response comes from presence, it tends to be clearer, more direct, and more effective. You stop spending energy trying to control everything and start using energy to act on what can actually be done now. This shift, seemingly small, completely transforms the internal dynamic. Over time, you realize that the energy that once seemed scarce actually begins to circulate again. Ideas arise more easily. Creativity returns. The body feels lighter, and the sensation of living on autopilot begins to fade. Not because life has become perfect, but because you have returned to participating in it consciously. Perhaps that is why so many ancient traditions, across different cultures, have always pointed in the same direction. They spoke about presence, attention, and awareness of the moment, not as an abstract concept, but as a daily practice. Something that must be remembered repeatedly until it becomes natural. Because the truth is that the mind will always tend to escape into the past or the future. This movement is part of human functioning. The difference lies in noticing when it happens and having the ability to return to the body, to the environment, to the real moment that is unfolding. And each time you make that return, something within you becomes stronger. The capacity to be here, the capacity to live the moment, instead of merely thinking about it, the capacity to use your energy consciously. And so, in the end, this entire journey always leads back to the same initial question, the one that opened everything, and that now perhaps carries a much deeper meaning than it seemed to at the beginning. What exactly is draining your energy right now? If you observe carefully enough, you will see that the answer is not hidden somewhere far away. It appears whenever your attention becomes completely lost in thoughts that do not belong to the present moment. And in the same way, the solution appears whenever your attention returns to the present. Because the instant you are truly here, completely here, something changes. Energy begins to flow again. The mind becomes quiet. The experience becomes more real. And when that happens, you finally realize something that was present from the very beginning. Your energy was never truly lost. It was simply waiting for your attention to come back home, if this message truly resonated with you. If you felt that quiet inner shift, that sense that your mind is ready for something greater, I left a resource in the pinned comment that goes deeper into this process. I only recommend it for those who feel genuinely ready to accelerate their results, but follow it in your own time. If it calls to you, you'll find it there. What you just heard about the universe appearing within consciousness becomes much clearer when you understand something that was explained before this video. In the previous video, we looked at what actually drains your energy in everyday life. The fragmentation of attention, the mind constantly leaving the present moment, and the resistance to what is happening. It shows why your energy becomes scattered between past, future, distraction, and inner tension. Without that understanding, everything we explored here can remain only as an idea. With it, the shift becomes practical, because presence is where attention returns, energy concentrates, and perception becomes clear again. If you want to see where this process really begins, the previous video is on your screen now.